The young man who entered my courtroom that Thursday morning carried with him an air of unshakable confidence, the kind reserved for those who had never been told no. Ethan Carrington, 24 years old, son of Rhode Island State Senator James Carrington, strode in as though the weight of the law could bend to his father's influence. His father wasn't just any politician, he was chairman of the Judiciary Committee, the very body overseeing judicial appointments and budgets. Ethan's presence alone seemed to command authority before he even spoke. Everything about him radiated privilege. His tailored 3000 suit clung perfectly to his frame. Italian leather shoes glinted under the courtroom lights. A Rolex glimmered on his wrist, worth more than most people's cars. There was a confidence in his posture, a quiet arrogance that suggested he had already decided how this would end, with a simple phone call to his father making any charges vanish. Behind him trailed an entourage that money and influence could buy. 4 lawyers, including Thomas Brennan, a former attorney general, billing $2,000 an hour. Their connections to every power broker in the state nearly as valuable as the defense they provided. And then there was Jessica Torres, sitting in the front row, small, bruised, and visibly frightened. At 29, she was a high school teacher at Hope High School, someone with no wealth, no political leverage, and no army of attorneys. Her arm was encased in a cast, the remnants of bruises fading across her face and arms. Her eyes, wide and wary, carried the kind of fear that comes from being harmed by someone with power, and then threatened into silence. She had been warned repeatedly that speaking out could ruin her career, destroy her reputation, and make her life unbearable. The charges were serious assault, battery, witness intimidation, and obstruction of justice. According to the police report, Ethan had been intoxicated in a downtown bar when Jessica accidentally brushed past him. In response, he grabbed her arm, yanked her backward, and slammed her against the bar, fracturing her wrist and leaving her body covered in bruises. When other patrons attempted to intervene, Ethan had shouted, "Do you know who I am? My father is Senator James Carrington. He runs this state. Touch me, and I'll destroy every single one of you." Security cameras recorded every second of the incident. What followed only compounded the danger. Hours after filing her report, Jessica received anonymous calls urging her to drop the charges. Senator Carrington's office framed it as concern for a teacher facing unfounded accusations from the son of a prominent family, warning that pursuing the matter could jeopardize her teaching career. Teachers, they implied, who dared challenge powerful families often found their contracts unrenewed and reputations destroyed. Jessica wavered, nearly withdrawing her complaint, but the intervention of Detective Maria Santos, courageous and steadfast, gave her the resolve to stand firm, assuring her that the law would protect her. Now, she sat in my courtroom, tense and uncertain, watching as privilege and power loomed before her. The next 17 minutes would test every assumption about justice, and the outcome would shock Rhode Island. I called the court to order. "Counselor, I asked for your client's plea, not an opening statement. I need to hear from your client." Thomas Brennan, with decades of political weight behind him, rose immediately. "Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty. We believe this incident has been mischaracterized. Miss Torres is seeking attention and financial gain by targeting the son of a prominent political figure." "I did not ask for your statement," I interrupted, my gaze firm. "I asked your client for his plea." Ethan rose, and arrogance radiated from every line of his posture. "Not guilty, Your Honor, this is a joke. I barely touched her. She's exaggerating because she recognized my name." Jessica lowered her gaze, clutching her cast. "Monsieur Carrington," I said, "you just accused Miss Torres of fabricating her injuries for money. That is a serious allegation. Do you have evidence for that?" Ethan replied smoothly, "It's obvious. She's a teacher making $45,000 a year. My family is prominent and wealthy. She saw an opportunity." I set my pen down carefully. "People in your position. And what position is that exactly?" "My father is State Senator James Carrington," he said with a smirk. "Chair of the Judiciary Committee. One of the most powerful politicians in Rhode Island. That makes me a target for people looking for money or attention." Turning to Brennan, I asked sharply, "Did you advise your client to invoke his father's political position in open court?" The former attorney general shifted uncomfortably. The courtroom, silent for a moment, absorbed the weight of those words. For the first time, the balance of power seemed precarious, as though the law itself might finally stand between privilege and accountability. In that instant, every person present understood that in this courtroom, Ethan Carrington's father's influence ended at the threshold. "Your Honor," Thomas Brennan began, his voice smooth with practiced authority. "My client is simply explaining the context. The context is that he believes his father's political influence should have bearing on this proceeding." I turned sharply to the prosecutor. "Miss Chen, please present your evidence." Jennifer Chen stepped forward, tablet in hand. "Your Honor, we have security footage from the Raven Lounge capturing the entire incident. May I play it?" I nodded, and the bailiff dimmed the courtroom lights. The footage was crystal clear, captured from multiple high-definition angles. Ethan Carrington appeared at the bar, visibly intoxicated, laughing and drinking with 3 friends. The camera followed Jessica Torres as she carefully navigated the crowded bar, carrying drinks back to her table where 2 fellow teachers sat. Her elbow brushed Ethan's shoulder, barely any contact at all. But Ethan spun around, his face twisting in fury. He seized Jessica's arm, yanking her backward with violent force. Her drink spilled across the floor. In a heartbeat, he shoved her against the bar, so forcefully that the bartender jumped back in alarm. Jessica's face collided with the edge of the wooden bar, and her wrist bent at a grotesque angle as he slammed it against the surface. Other patrons rushed forward, attempting to intervene. Ethan released Jessica for a moment, but turned to confront the onlookers chest to chest, shouting and pointing aggressively. A security guard approached cautiously, only to be met with Ethan's defiance. Finally, his friends pulled him away. The camera then followed him into the parking lot, climbing into a Range Rover. But before leaving, he turned back, pulled out his phone, and made a call. The time stamped 11:47 p.m. "Your Honor," Chen continued. "That call was to his father's chief of staff, Martin Reynolds. We have phone records confirming it. The call lasted 6 minutes. Within 2 hours, Miss Torres began receiving threatening phone calls urging her to drop the charges." The courtroom was silent when the lights returned. I looked at Ethan, whose complexion had paled slightly, though his jaw remained tight with defiance. "Mr. Carrington," I said evenly, "you just watch yourself assault Miss Torres. You grabbed her arm, slammed her against the bar, and broke her wrist. Do you still maintain you barely touched her?" Ethan's attorneys whispered urgently, trying to intervene, but he ignored them. "Your Honor, I was drunk. She bumped into me. I reacted. It wasn't that serious. She's fine." I leaned forward. "She has a fractured wrist that required surgery. She has bruises that took weeks to heal. In what universe is that fine?" He shrugged, unconcerned. "Accidents happen in crowded bars. I'm being prosecuted because of who my father is, not because of what I did." I turned to Jessica. "Miss Torres, please approach." She stood slowly, trembling, each step seeming to weigh heavily. Her fear was palpable, her exhaustion obvious after weeks of threats and intimidation. I gestured for her to speak. "Tell me what happened that night, and what occurred after you filed the police report." Her voice was soft, shaking. "Your Honor, I was at the Raven Lounge with 2 colleagues from Hope High School. We'd gone out after parent-teacher conferences to decompress. I was walking back to our table with drinks when I accidentally brushed past Mr. Carrington, barely touching his shoulder." She paused, unconsciously touching her cast. "He grabbed me so hard I felt his fingers digging into my arm. He yanked me backward and slammed me face first into the bar. My wrist snapped. The pain was so intense I couldn't breathe. When others tried to help me, he threatened them, shouting about his father being a senator and how he could destroy them." Tears welled in her eyes. "I went to the hospital. They told me my wrist was fractured in 2 places. I needed surgery to put pins in. The doctor said I might never regain full strength in that hand. I'm a teacher. I write on the board grade papers. I need my hands." I asked gently, "What happened after you filed the police report?" "The calls started the next day," she whispered. "Unknown numbers, mostly male voices. They told me I was making a mistake, that Senator Carrington's office was concerned about false accusations, and that pursuing charges would be bad for my career. One person even said teachers who make trouble for prominent families often have trouble getting contracts renewed. I almost withdrew my complaint. I was terrified." Her voice broke completely. "I love teaching. It's all I've ever wanted. I've been at Hope High for 5 years. My evaluations are excellent. My students respect me. But suddenly, after filing charges, my principal started getting calls. School committee members were asking questions about me. I was told, for the good of the school, maybe I should reconsider my accusations. I almost dropped the charges. I was terrified. The courtroom held its collective breath. Jessica's words hung in the air, raw and undeniable, a stark contrast to the arrogance of privilege sitting just feet away. It was clear the law had been tested by wealth, influence, and intimidation. But here, in this room, the truth demanded to be heard. But then I thought about my students. I teach them that integrity matters. I teach them that standing up to bullies matters. That the law applies to everyone equally, no matter who they are or what their last name is. How could I instill those lessons if I allowed someone to assault another human being and walk away unpunished simply because his father wielded immense political power? The courtroom was silent, every eye on Ethan Carrington, who now stared at the polished surface of the table before him, either unwilling or unable to meet Jessica's gaze. His arrogance, once so pronounced, seemed to falter in the stillness. "Miss Torres," I said, my voice steady, "you mentioned receiving phone calls that threatened your career. Do you have evidence of these calls?" "I recorded 3 of them, Your Honor," she replied, her voice wavering but determined. After the second call, I started recording every unknown number. Jennifer Chen stepped forward. "Your Honor, we have those recordings. May I play them?" "Please do," I said. The first recording played. A cold, professional male voice filled the courtroom. "Miss Torres, this is a courtesy call. Senator Carrington's office is aware of the allegations you've made against his son. We believe there has been a misunderstanding. The senator would like to resolve this matter quietly and generously. He is prepared to offer you $50 and to cover your medical expenses and compensate you for your time. In exchange, you would withdraw your complaint and sign a non-disclosure agreement. This offer expires in 24 hours. Jessica's voice trembled. "I don't want money. I want justice." The male voice hardened. "Think carefully, Miss Torres. The senator chairs the Judiciary Committee. He has significant influence over judicial appointments, including the judges who might oversee your case. He also has allies on the school committee at Hope High School. It would be unfortunate if your teaching career suffered because of poor decisions. Take the money. Move on." The first recording ended, and the courtroom erupted into whispers and audible gasps. The second recording, from a different male voice, was sharper, more threatening. "Miss Torres, you're making a huge mistake. Do you know how many teachers are looking for jobs? Do you know how easy it is to find reasons not to renew a contract? Drop this now, or you will regret it." The third recording was chilling, delivered by a calm, measured, older male voice. "Jessica, I am calling on behalf of people concerned about Rhode Island's political stability. What you're doing could damage an important senator's reputation over what was clearly an accident between 2 intoxicated people at a bar. Think about your future. Think about your family. Is this really worth destroying your life?" The recordings ended. A pin could have dropped in the courtroom. I turned to Thomas Brennan. "Miss Jetta, Brennan, do you recognize any of those voices?" He looked genuinely shocked. "No, Your Honor. I was not aware of any contact between my client's family and Miss Torres beyond standard legal channels." Jennifer Chen added, "Your Honor, we've identified the first caller through phone records, Martin Reynolds, Chief of Staff to Senator Carrington. The call originated from the senator's office just 2 hours after Miss Torres filed her report. The remaining calls were made from burner phones, untraceable at this time." I addressed the courtroom, my voice deliberate. "If you believe using political power to intimidate witnesses is an attack on justice itself, watch closely. What I am about to do will send a clear message. No senator's influence extends beyond the doors of this courtroom." I rose. The weight of my action was immense. Taking on the son of a state senator meant political scrutiny, professional pressure, and potential retaliation. But 38 years ago, I took an oath to uphold the law impartially. That oath contained no exceptions for the politically connected. "Mr. Carrington," I began, locking eyes with him, "the evidence against you is overwhelming. Security footage proves you assaulted Miss Torres without provocation. Phone records confirm your call to your father's chief of staff immediately after the incident. Recordings show that Miss Torres received threatening messages designed to coerce her into dropping charges. This is more than assault. It is an organized attempt to obstruct justice through political power. Ethan's face had gone pale, the first crack in his facade of arrogance. Thomas Brennan rose, protesting, "Your Honor, my client did not make those calls. There's no evidence tying him to them directly." I looked at Ethan. "Your client may not have personally dialed those numbers, but he set the machine in motion. He knew his father's power would shield him. That is why he was so brazen, shouting about his father's influence at the bar. Mr. Carrington, you believed that your father's political power made you untouchable. You thought you could assault a teacher and rely on intimidation to make it disappear. You were wrong." The courtroom was still. Every person present, from spectators to lawyers, understood that this was more than a trial. It was a reckoning. Privilege and influence might be pervasive, but in this courtroom, justice remained unyielding. "Here is my finding. You, Ethan Carrington, are guilty of assault and battery. The video evidence is irrefutable. The footage shows you acting with deliberate aggression, grabbing Miss Torres, yanking her backward, and slamming her against the bar with such force that her wrist fractured. But your actions did not stop there. You are also guilty of obstruction of justice. Immediately after the assault, you contacted your father's office, setting in motion a campaign of witness intimidation aimed at pressuring Miss Torres into dropping her charges. What makes this situation even more alarming, however, is not just the assault itself, but the abuse of political influence that followed. Your father holds a position of public trust. The resources and authority of his office exist to serve the citizens of Rhode Island, not to shield his son from the consequences of criminal behavior. By invoking his position, by using his office to threaten a crime victim, you transformed public service into a tool for personal protection. That is not merely a crime. It is a profound betrayal of democratic principles. I pause, letting the weight of those words settle in the courtroom. Every person present, from spectators to your own attorneys, understood the gravity of this abuse. Here is your sentence for assault and battery: 1 year in the adult correctional institutions. This sentence is not suspended. You will serve 12 months of actual incarceration, learning firsthand that no amount of privilege or political connection exempts anyone from the law. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Ethan's face flushed with a mix of anger and disbelief. 1 year, Your Honor. This is political. You're doing this because of my father? No, Mr. Carrington, I replied firmly. I am sentencing you not because of your father, but in spite of him. If anything, your father's position makes this worse. You corrupted public office to shield yourself, and that is intolerable. This court will not permit such an abuse of power. Thomas Brennan rose immediately. Your Honor, this sentence is excessive. 1 year for a bar fight. This was not a bar fight, Mr. Brennan, I said. This was a targeted assault, followed by an organized witness intimidation campaign using state resources. Your client broke Miss Torres's wrist, and then leveraged political influence to try to silence her. That demands severe consequences. Furthermore, your punishment will extend beyond confinement. After your release, you will complete 1,000 hours of community service teaching civics at public schools. You will instruct students on democratic principles, the equal application of justice under the law, and the importance of accountability. You will teach the very values you sought to undermine through your actions. In addition, you will pay full restitution to Miss Torres. This includes her medical expenses, lost wages, and compensation for pain and suffering. On top of that, you will pay an additional $50,000, the exact amount your father's office attempted to offer her in exchange for silence. This money is not hush money. It is compensation for the trauma of being threatened by those attempting to deny her justice. Most importantly, a full report of these proceedings will be submitted to the Rhode Island Ethics Commission, the Attorney General's office, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The phone calls Miss Torres received constitute witness tampering and must be investigated at the highest levels. If your father authorized or had knowledge of using his office to intimidate a victim, that represents serious criminal misconduct that requires accountability. No senator, regardless of power or position, is above the law. I turned to Jessica Torres. Miss Torres, your courage is extraordinary. You refuse to be silenced by threats or financial inducements. You placed justice above personal safety and career risk. You were right. Today, this court confirms that your bravery has not been in vain. The law will protect you just as Detective Santos promised. Tears welled in her eyes. Thank you for believing me, she whispered, overwhelmed. Finally, a protective order is being issued on your behalf. Ethan Carrington, his family, attorneys, and any associates are prohibited from contacting Miss Torres directly or indirectly. She will have the security and assurance to continue her life and career without fear of harassment or retaliation. Ethan's face, once confident and defiant, now reflected the enormity of his situation. For the first time, he understood that privilege does not shield anyone from justice. Here, in this courtroom, equality under the law was not a concept, it was enforced. If you receive any more threatening calls, any pressure, or any retaliation, you contact Detective Santos immediately, I said, my voice firm and unwavering. This court will not tolerate further witness intimidation under any circumstances. My gaze swept across the courtroom gallery. Several men in expensive suits sat quietly, their presence unmistakable. Political operatives likely sent to observe the proceedings. I addressed them directly, and through them, everyone who would hear of this case. Rhode Island has a problem, I said, letting the words resonate. We live in a culture where political connections sometimes matter more than justice, where influential families operate under a different set of rules, and where victims stay silent because they know the system is often rigged. That culture stops here. In my courtroom, no one is above the law. I don't care if your father is a senator, a congressman, or even the governor. I don't care if you know judges, prosecutors, or police chiefs. In this room, you are judged solely by your actions and your character. I looked directly at Ethan Carrington. You assaulted a teacher and then tried to leverage your father's political machine to silence her. Today, you've learned that political power has limits. In a democracy, no one is exempt from accountability. Justice cannot be bought or avoided, no matter how much money or influence your family holds. The gavel fell. The bailiff approached to take Ethan into custody. His eyes darted desperately toward his attorneys. Call my father. He'll fix this. He always fixes things, he said, panic breaking through his previously unshakable arrogance. Mr. Carrington, I said quietly but firmly, your father cannot fix this. And if investigations find he was involved in witness tampering, he will face far greater consequences than your incarceration. This is your responsibility. Face it with dignity. As they led Ethan away, the men in expensive suits rose swiftly, already on their phones, clearly attempting damage control. That evening, Senator James Carrington issued a statement. I was not aware of any inappropriate contact with Miss Torres. I support the judicial process and respect Judge Caprio's decision. I am cooperating fully with all investigations. 3 months later, the Ethics Commission confirmed that Martin Reynolds, the senator's chief of staff, had indeed made calls to Miss Torres on the senator's behalf. Senator Carrington claimed he only asked for a settlement offer, not witness intimidation. The distinction was slight, and the Ethics Commission formally censured him. The political fallout was immediate. Senator Carrington chose not to seek re-election, effectively ending his political career because his son believed power made him untouchable. 1 year later, Ethan Carrington returned to my courtroom for his probationary hearing, having served his sentence. The transformation was remarkable. The arrogance and entitlement were gone, replaced by humility and genuine remorse. Your Honor, Ethan began, voice subdued, I've served my sentence. I'm ready to begin my community service teaching civics. But I want to say something first. He turned to Jessica Torres, who had agreed to attend. Miss Torres, I'm sorry, I assaulted you. I broke your wrist, I caused you pain and trauma, and then I tried to use my father's power to silence you. I was a coward, believing privilege could shield me from consequences. You, however, showed courage. You stood up to power when it would have been easier to take the money and remain silent. Thank you for your bravery. Jessica nodded, accepting his apology. Ethan continued, his voice earnest. Your Honor, you told me I corrupted democratic principles. You were right. I used public office for personal protection. That's exactly what is wrong with politics. People using power for private benefit instead of serving the public. I vow to spend the rest of my life trying to be better than that. I addressed the courtroom, letting the lesson resonate beyond these walls. If this story moves you, share it widely. Let it serve as a reminder that political power should never place anyone above the law. Democracy functions only when every individual is held accountable for their actions. Today, Ethan Carrington used his father's influence, and justice prevailed. More importantly, Jessica Torres's right to justice was defended. In America, no one is above the law. The courtroom was silent as the weight of the moment settled in. Ethan had faced consequences. A powerful political figure had been censured, and a brave woman had been vindicated. The law had spoken clearly, and the principles of accountability and justice had been reaffirmed. "Court adjourned," I declared. As the gavel fell, the room emptied, leaving behind the certainty that justice, when applied without fear or favor, remains the cornerstone of a functioning democracy.